Okay, what I wanted to go over today is understanding HDRI images, high dynamic range images, and IBL. IBL is image-based lighting. Both of these are kind of tied together, and so I wanted to go in to explain these a little bit. Now, high dynamic range images are images that store more data than just a normal, like a JPEG or TIFF or Targa. You can kind of think of it as they're kind of like it's almost like a Photoshop file with layers. So it's kind of like they're storing layers, but what they're storing is lighting data. So when somebody's shooting one of these, they're bracketing different exposures, and then they're putting that all together in one image. Okay, so it has lighting data in it. Okay, so you're able to actually use this image to actually light your scene, and that's what image-based lighting is where you're taking an HDRI image and you're using it to help you light a scene. Now, the way we use these all the time, HDRI images, is in reflection. So we're using them to reflect into our objects. Okay, that's one way that we use them. Could be like this is a car and it's sitting on like a showroom floor, and we're getting some nice reflections, and those are from our HDRI image. Or it could be a tabletop setting in which that we're using a special kind of like studio HDRI to get studio lighting to it. Okay. Other things that we do is we take models that we've built. So we have dimensional models. And then what we want to do is to go put them actually into what we're going to call a backplate. We're going to composite those into a photograph, and we're doing those in such a way so that we marry the 3D image into the photograph, and then we're using HDRI to reflect this scene back into our object. Okay, so that's how we kind of use it in our 3D world. Now, HDRI, we're actually using it two ways. One way is we're doing what's called reflection mapping, or it's also referred to as environment mapping. And what that is that we're actually taking that HDRI image and we're wrapping it. The way you can kind of think of it is you're wrapping it on a sphere, a dome around our object to reflect back into it. So our object has interesting things to reflect back into it. So we're doing what's called reflection mapping. The other thing is image-based lighting, referred to as IBL, and that's where we're actually taking the lighting data from it and the color from it, and we're actually using that to light the scene. So we're taking that image that we're floating around the scene in a sphere, okay, and we're reflecting it into our objects, as well as we're using the lighting data in it to light and cast global illumination shadows on our objects. Okay, now the HDRI images come in a couple different ways. Okay, they come, sometimes you'll find them when there's what's called a panorama. Okay, and that's where it's unfolded out, and it's like the right side matches with the left side, wraps back around. Or you can also find what's called probes. Okay, both of these can be used. Whether you're using whatever software you're using, 3dsMax, Maya, then you'll have a special probe, maybe called Chrome Ball, that node that you plug this into that'll basically unwrap it and wrap it around your scene. Or you'll use the panorama. So that you'll find that both of these, when you're looking for HDRIs, you'll find them. They basically do the same thing. There are some basic differences, but for the most part, they do the same thing. Now, when you're looking for your HDRI images, basically you're finding environments. Okay, now sometimes you'll find exteriors and sometimes you'll find interiors. And so according to how we're staging our scene, whatever we're actually doing, then sometimes we'll want it to be reflecting the outdoors. Or sometimes we're putting it inside somewhere and we want it to be reflecting the interior. Okay. Now, other things that we find, there's some other types of HDR files called studio files. Okay. And these are lighting scenarios like we want to do some type of a desktop where we're setting a product on a desktop and we're wanting to have some nice reflections into it. And so we're not really wanting an interior or exterior environment. What we're wanting is lights. Okay. And it looks like it's sitting in a studio. And so you'll find some studio HDR images as well. Now, what you're really doing, and you'll be able to find these sometimes, and these are the ones that are really nice, and this one's I'm going to demonstrate today, is you'll find an HDRI image, and it'll also come with backplates. Okay, the backplates are the images that were shot at this location that we want to put our 3D object in, and then we're using the HDR image to actually create the reflections in it, as well as create the lighting that goes in it as well. Okay, so there are some sites that you can go, and I'll put links on the post with these. But so you want to be able to find some that have this and backplates, and then you can marry those together. So HDRI images are used in a couple different ways. One way is to create reflection into our objects. Okay, we're called environment mapping or reflection mapping. And the other one is to generate light for our scene. Image-based lighting, or IBL, is what it's referred to. Okay, so that's how that's some background information on these, and then I'm going to go in to demonstrate how to use these. Now, some other information on these. Here's an example of an HDRI image, okay, and I've got it in a special little utility that allows me to actually see the different exposures in here. And so I'm going to go through here and show you the different exposures. And so I'm clicking through overexposing it, okay, and I'm clicking now back to underexpose it. And so both of these, all this data is stored in this one image. It's not really stored in layers, but you can kind of think of it as stored in layers, but it's storing all this lighting information, which really helps us when we're wanting to do some form of compositing. Okay, so here I wanted to show you an actual HDRI and show you some bracketing with it, some exposures with it, and show you the difference between it and something that's not a high dynamic range, okay? So what I have, this is in Photoshop, and I've got an exposure control on it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is turn down the exposure on this, okay? And so we're going to go over here. I'm going to do it like a -3 on the exposure. And you'll see that we still have a lot of detail in this, okay? Now, if I actually go into, this is a JPEG of the same scene, okay? So if I go to a JPEG of the same scene, then what's going to happen in this is when I start dealing with the exposure, -3, you'll see the whole thing grays down like this. Okay, that's really not what we're wanting, okay? This is the HDRI with a -3, and that's the JPEG with a -3. See how the JPEG just gets gray and darker, but we still have detail in this. Okay, let's go up to a +4, let's say. We'll do a +3. Okay, this is the HDR image with the +3. And there's the JPEG with the +3. HDRI, see how we're still holding all this nice detail in this? With the JPEG, it's all kind of getting weirded out, illuminated colors and stuff. So it's a drastic difference dealing with an HDRI image, okay? So that's what we want, is HDRI images, because they give us more dynamic range when we're using them to deal with our objects. Okay, so what I want to show you here is when we're talking about the IBL, the image-based lighting, that's coupling with global illumination. And global illumination in mental ray is referred to as final gather. So what I have is a skylight in the scene that I'm illuminating these spheres with. And then we'll put a ground plane in here, and you'll see that our skylight is actually generating bounce lighting and give us some soft shadows in here. Okay, so that's what global illumination does, is final gather and max. But I'm just using white in my skylight. Once I drop an HDRI image in it, look at the difference. Okay, this is without the HDRI. This is with the HDRI, and so it's pulling color and lighting information from that HDRI images to know where to cast the shadows. So look at the color that it's adding, the lighting that it's adding, as well as the shadow that it's adding. Okay, that's all through the image-based lighting. Okay, now while we're in here, I also want to talk about this because I see a lot of people using non-physical based lights, like an Omni light, okay? And OmniLights do shadow maps, and these are non-realistic looking shadows, okay? This is not what we want to use. You guys need to get away from using OmniLights and spotlights because they're not correct. What you're wanting is an area light or an area shadow, okay? An area shadow will be a soft shadow like this. So that's what you're wanting to use when you're dealing with this. Is you do not want some type of non-physical light. You want a physical light that actually mimics real world lights. Okay, another thing I want to go into is shaders, okay, the actual shaders that you guys are using. I still see a lot of you people using standard shaders, or if you're a Maya, using Lamberts and blends. Those are stupid shaders. Those are outdated shaders. They are not physically based. They do not understand the environment. This is in Max. This is a composite I did in Max, okay? And what I have on these are standard shaders, and I have ray trace on them. Now, ray trace is where you can actually calculate reflections of the objects in the scene. Now, they're not showing the HDRI. They're just reflecting the objects in their scene, okay? Now, if I come in here and I put the HDRI in here, then they're reflecting the HDRI, but then again, they're not ray tracing, okay? It is possible to do both of them, but you have to really do a lot of weird stuff. Okay, these are not good shaders. You guys need to get away from using standard shaders. You're going to see a lot of tutorials out there, and people talk about standard shaders. That's because they're old tutorials. Do not use standard shaders. You want to bring your artwork into, the 20th century. Okay, we're using physical-based shaders. Okay, now here is Arch and Design shaders. Okay, this is in Max. So this is an Arch and Design shaders with a ray trace. There is no HDRI image loaded. Okay, this is the ray trace. Okay, look at the difference between that and this. This is the ray trace using standard shaders. This is ray trace using Arch and Design shaders. They are more accurate. Okay, then if I add in some physical-based reflections in it, okay? So there's the ray trace without an HDRI wrapped around it. There's the HDRI wrapped around it, okay? This is bumping up the HDRI sky, the skylight, plus 10 to add a little boost into it, okay? And then I've gone in and added a photometric light into it here to boost it up a little bit more. So this is my final piece. This is Arch and Design shaders. They understand physical base. They're based on what real world attributes, what real surfaces would do, okay? And we're using image-based lighting, so the HDRI is reflecting, is actually showing the lighting and the shadowing. It's also doing reflection mapping, it's environment reflecting back in, and I'm compositing this on a backplate. And so this actual HDRI that's in here actually is coupled with this backplate so that I can get these seamlessly composited together. And that's what I'm going to be going over in my demonstration, is how to do this in Max. Okay? All right. Thank you very much.